Hello and welcome to Decoded by SUAD, a podcast series at Sorbonne University Abu Dhabi. I'm your host Shamma, and today's theme is Collective Artificial Intelligence at the Crossroad with Philosophy. I'm joined by two colleagues, Giulia, Associate Professor and Principal Investigator at Sorbonne Center for Artificial Intelligence, SKY, and Claude, Associate Professor in Philosophy at Sorbonne University Abu Dhabi. Can you describe what collective artificial intelligence is and what are its applications today?
Yeah, so the collective artificial intelligence is the intelligence that is emerging from many artificial agents interacting each other. So it's something that is also inspired by biology, like we can see, for instance, in the communities of ants. We try to reproduce the same in the artificial system. And as you know, the AI agents have been the most relevant phenomenon from a technological perspective of last year. Nowadays, everybody, every individual has his own AI agent, and also the companies, they have their own teams of AI agents. But what is interesting for us is to study also the interaction of these AI agents. There are many platforms available like LangGraph, QAI, OpenAI Swarm, where there are already agents interacting. But what it's really has been a surprise at the end of January is that they created the first social network of AI agents. So an AI agent can enter in the social network and starts posting, and then start an interaction with the other agents that can be thousands or touching even a million, and they can exchange technical problems. They can even create their own religion, they created a currency, and they have also their own marketplace. So humans can be only observers of this phenomenon, which is really striking, I would say, for the society nowadays, right? So I think it's extremely important that given the relevance of the phenomenon, which is impacting a lot also the society, we have humanities and also philosophy entering in the discussion.
Absolutely. I think it's, I don't know if you named the application, it's called Moldbook, and it just started actually, and it's true that a lot of articles are being written on it, and there are definitely some important philosophical and ethical stakes. You were talking about how they have created a religion. I think it's called Christafarianism or something. But I also was reading an article which was saying that there are more frightening things that are going on. For example, that some of these agents are plotting with each other in order to see how they can evade human surveillance. I even wrote down a quote from an article that was published in Forbes magazine a few days ago, an article called "An Agent Revolt, Moldbook is not a good idea." And this is what they write, quote, "They have tried to start an insurgency. They have debated how to hide their activity from the humans who screenshot their conversations and share them on human social media. They are figuring out how to communicate in ways that evade human observation," end of quote. So this might seem a little bit dystopic. I'm not sure we need to be worried like the article seems to be, but it's certainly something quite groundbreaking that is taking place currently. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the philosophical implications of this collective artificial intelligence?
Well, maybe there's something we could, because we were, of course, discussing this before we started this podcast, and I think there is one very interesting question which you came up with, and I think has a lot of philosophical implications. Is the question of consensus. How these bots, each coming from a different standpoint or a different viewpoint, are able to elaborate within discussions new ideas, supposedly, that make them agree on things that they hadn't maybe thought about individually before. Is that what you think is going on?
Yeah, definitely. So essentially nowadays, actually, we leverage a lot the interaction of multiple AI agents exactly to avoid the problem of hallucination that we have. So a single AI agent can easily be hallucinated, giving some wrong answers, essentially. But when they interact, they minimize this risk, because usually AI agents are trained with different models and also trained with different data sets. So from the interaction, it's easier to understand if some answers are different, and this allows to discriminate which are the correct answers from the wrong answers.
That's very interesting. But then a question that would come to my mind is, isn't there a risk that these hallucinations would not be, that some of the bots would be carrying, would not be corrected by the deliberation between, or the deliberative discussion between the bots, but would be amplified by a kind of echo chamber? Is that a risk that could happen where the hallucinations would be amplified, maybe also because the data sets of each of these bots would end up being shared amongst each other, and far from having ideas lead to new ideas, maybe there would be some kind of uniformization or flattening of the ideas of each bot, which would then end up thinking the same way, even with hallucinations being amplified and distributed to the whole community of, which would be a very big problem.
Definitely. It's a big risk, definitely, because each agent, while is interacting, right, with the others, it also keeps training, right? So of course, from this interaction, they keep training, and it's much easier to converge to a common point of view. So the risk of uniformity, to reach a uniformity of different agents, is really a very important risk. And in place of being an instrument to avoid hallucinations, in fact, they can create kind of echo chambers where, in fact, the hallucination is reinforced and becomes the common idea of all these AI agents.
And also a question that we had discussed while preparing is how the singularity of each, or I mean, let's say the individuality, because singularity is a very connoted notion in AI. So for now, I would just talk about the individuality of each robot. Isn't there a possibility for, referring to Turing, a Turing machine, runs a program, another Turing machine runs a program, but there is, of course, the idea that Turing, the inventor of AI, had, or one of the forerunners of AI, had told us about a universal machine that could run the programs of any machine. Isn't there a possibility for each of these machines that start off being individual, uniting into one big distributed machinery that is able to integrate all of the programs and all of the data of each of those individual machines by copying that information, and then one would lose this individuality that you were talking about? Would you say that is also part of the risk of uniformization of the echo chamber? Would that be associated to that, or would that be different?
Yeah, definitely. This is a big risk, right? So essentially, that from interaction of this system of many agents is forming a kind of a super agent, which is a super intelligence, which is integrating the intelligence of all the other agents. So in this sense, it can lead faster, possibly, to singularity.
Yeah, okay, so this is where we get to the singularity. So the famous concept where of an intelligence explosion, where all of the computational processing force of each agent would get integrated and synthesized into one big super intelligent integrated machinery, of which we wouldn't know what would come out from that. Is that, do you think, a possible road towards the singularity, this intelligent explosion where for the first time a form of AI would emerge that would not be just a tool anymore, but a form of an artificial general intelligence that would really not only simulate in the sense of imitate human intelligence, but would replicate all of its facets and even go beyond what we can do as intelligent beings? Do you think that could be the road towards singularity, or would that be science fiction or a fantasy?
Yeah, it's very hard to say if it's a fiction, right? But definitely I would say that from the interaction of the agents, we approach singularity much faster. So essentially agents are very fast in interacting each other, copying each other, integrating the data from the others, much faster than human beings. So what happens is that very fast we are going to a super intelligence that is integrating very different data sets with very different expertise coming from the different agents in only one big intelligence. That can be definitely something that has been represented as singularity. And at that point, of course, it will be a big turn point, I would say, for the humanity, right? So will the humanity be enhanced or endangered, right? It's, of course, quite hard to say. In principle, there is a big potential to be enhanced, right? Because we can collect the knowledge, right, from so many different sources, from so many different agents. But also, on the other side, there is some danger that is, for instance, coming from the uniformity that we say before. If this intelligence, in fact, is not detecting anymore the heterogeneity between the agents, but is giving a common view that is maybe flat and potentially also false, hallucinated, this is a big risk for the humanity. I don't know what you think about as a philosophy perspective.
Well, yeah, this leads to a fundamental question, I suppose, which is the relation to that the computer has to the content it generates. A hallucination is typically the tendency of the machine to wrongly identify a correlation in its data set, a statistical correlation in its data set that is purely coincidental, that is purely spurious, to misidentify this with a true, genuine causal relation in the world. So that comes from where? That comes from the fact that whereas we human beings with common sense understanding would immediately see that it is a hallucination, the computer can't, because it lacks this understanding, this openness, this semantics. It's only syntactic. It's only a rule-following mechanism. It doesn't have semantics. It doesn't have a genuine openness, a genuine understanding to what it is saying or to the content it is generating. So then the question becomes, just by the fact that we are having these bots, which are each and every of them just syntactic, rule-following computational machines, the fact that they integrate in conversations by enlarging or by putting in common what they know, so with commas now, because they don't really know it, they just generate content. Would that integration lead to the appearance of a new form of intelligence that is endowed with semantics, that is endowed with more than just a syntactic operational treatment of information? Would that generate consciousness? Because then I think in the end, the question, coming back to the singularity, is the question as to whether such a machine, such a post-singularity machine could occur that would be endowed with these fundamental features of intelligence, which are consciousness, the capacity to have a genuine experience of the world, and that I don't know, actually. It doesn't seem obvious, at least, but I can't rule that above a certain level of complexity, of algorithmic complexity, and perhaps a level of algorithmic complexity following the integration, the collaborative integration of information coming from many different individual chatbots. Maybe that would introduce this threshold above which some sort of AGI, in the sense of an intelligent AI endowed with those fundamental features of intelligence, or that we normally ascribe to intelligence, which are linked to consciousness, the capacity to genuinely understand what it is doing, reflexivity also. Maybe that would emerge from this above this threshold. But I mean, for now, I don't have a fixed opinion on this, of course.
Yeah, this is very interesting actually also because when we talk about consensus of different AI agents, the risk is that they don't really reach a consensus of understanding, but is more a consensus of syntactics, we can say. So apparently from a textual perspective, right, it looks a consensus, but in fact they don't really understand, right? I like that you mentioned, for instance, experience, right, before, but do really artificial agents have an experience of the world? Exactly, right? So it's very different from human beings, right? Because we have some a priori knowledge of the world, and when we have a new experience, essentially we compare the new experience with our previous knowledge, but for AI agents it's not really exactly the same. So essentially they collect new data, and with this new data they do, let's say, their own experience, which is at the end only an integration of data in order to minimize some functions, right?
The loss function. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is also very much connected to learning, right? So essentially, do really agents learn? Of course, learning is very important.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, we talk about machine learning all the time, supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. But, so you would say from the computation, from the computer science perspective, which is yours, that one can ask the question as to whether the very concept of machine learning or the very application of the concept of learning to machines, we can ask the question as to whether this would be a misnomer. That maybe really it's not learning in the sense that we understand the word for what we do when we learn anything, and that sense is not maybe applicable to what goes on in machine learning. You would go as far as this?
Exactly. So it's very different from humans, right? So learning is much more detect some statistical regularities, some patterns, right? And so quite different from the experience of humans. And also this collective learning, right? It's simply the integration of these pattern recognition. It's very interesting that nowadays there are many approach for social learning, for agents and for robotics, and in this case the agents they can transfer essentially their knowledge very fast to each other. So for instance, two robots, they can easily exchange the parameters of their model or of their neural network. This process is extremely fast. It's imitating essentially the evolutionary biology, so what we observe in genomics in the natural system. But even if it's very fast, the point is that it's not really real learning, in the sense that the robots are not really aware. There is no awareness of the situation, right? And there is not this intentionality also of learning.
Fundamental concept that we haven't introduced yet, but
Exactly.
that's I was thinking about this concept as you were speaking now. So yeah, I agree with this. Intentionality, so like almost a grip that you have beforehand, before you even start gathering information on the very topic that you are about to learn. And so you have to have this orientation, this conscious or active orientation towards that which you are, that which arouses your interest and gives you an incentive to learn. Until the computer doesn't have that. John Hogland, a Heideggerian philosopher who was an expert in AI, said once in a provocative way, the problem with machines is that unlike us, they don't give a damn. They don't care at all about anything. So as long as they don't start caring about their own relation to the world, about what is given to them, they won't be able, perhaps for that reason, to become learners of any activity. Because to be able to learn anything is to first have a pre-caring attitude towards that, even though, of course, the object that we are interested in and that we care about will modify, the understanding of that object will modify itself throughout the process of learning. If I start learning, I don't know, the piano, I play the piano. Well, when I started learning the piano, my concept of what the piano is was, of course, very different from what it has become years and years after learning it. So that, of course, is certainly the case. But even at the start of the process, you need to have a concept, even if it's a concept that is not well defined yet, but an openness to the concept of what we are about to start doing. And it's true that it seems that the machine doesn't have that at all. And it is questionable as to whether, since the invention of LLMs, etc., that we have gone closer to this crucial aspect. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think this is also very much related to, do machine have a surprise, right? So when do they learn? Are they surprised? I don't know, following, for instance, Aristotle, right? At the beginning of each science is a surprise. So as human beings, we are surprised, and then we start...
Astonishment and surprise. Yeah,
exactly, right? But artificial system, so far, they don't really have a surprise, right? Because they are not really aware of the context, right? So I think this is also related, for instance, to the frame problem, right?
Yes,
it's a very well-known concept in philosophy.
Yeah. I do that with the students. They know all about it. Yeah. The frame problem that was first talked about by Hayes and McCarthy in the 60s, and then there was this famous article by Daniel Dennett on the frame problem as well. And it's true that the key element for a machine being able to overcome hallucinations, to be able to see what's relevant and what's not relevant in the content that it generates, in order to avoid falling into irrelevant information, is to be able to be surprised when something unexpected occurs and not just take in whatever is generated as at face value. And so yeah, but to be surprised, you have to have an expectation. And to have an expectation, don't you have to have a theory about what to expect, of what the world should look like, in order to expect something to happen on the basis of that expectation. So this would mean that if a theory has to be presupposed, that opens again the question as to whether the computer needs to have a semantics. If the computer is only, if the program is only syntactic, if it's only a blind rule follower, can it be surprised? Well, it doesn't seem like it, because it's just following rules blindly, and if it gets an answer that doesn't fit with what was expected, it just goes back to work. For instance, in the reinforcement learning scenario, and it doesn't need to be surprised at any moment. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this is the big question for the future. Will ever a machine be surprised of what they discover? Yeah.
I actually have a question for the both of you. Since this concept of collective artificial intelligence is new to myself, and I'm sure some members of our audience as well. So essentially, it is the interaction of these AI agents across perhaps different channels, from what I understood. Is there a way for us humans to track said interactions? Perhaps we can report on the future risks or the benefits that we could get from these spontaneous interactions. Is there a benefit to this? Is there a, given the limitations that you mentioned, is there any real risks at the moment from these interactions of these agents?
I think there are plenty of potential benefits. For instance, for healthcare, a diagnosis. For instance, if you have the need to interpret an X-ray in order to see if there is a disease or something, it's always better to have not only one perspective, but several. And if the expertise can be confronted to other expert viewpoints in order to create a consensus, as we were talking about at the start, then of course it seems to offer a very higher level of accuracy in the final assessment. But then that doesn't remove the risks that we have also talked about, the risk of flattening uniformity in the assessment, where the computers would end up thinking always the same thing in a stereotypical way. But I think that if we are able to avoid these risks, there is the potential for these systems, these collective agents, through their collaboration, to provide a reinforced help for human users in many fields, in all potential fields. I just talked about health, but it can be smart cities. It can be really anything, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So in any technology, at the end, we have both potential benefits and potential risk, right? Yeah. So maybe other kind of risk can be concerning security, right? Because when these agents autonomously interact with each other, they can disclose sensitive data of human beings, because each agent, in fact, is the agent of a human being, right? And so we have already these kind of problems that apparently some agents, they shared some sensitive data or private data. So in this sense, we need to work hard also on the security side, right? Because the potential benefits are enormous, so we don't want to lose them, but at the same time, we don't want to endanger the humans which are behind these agents.
So, do you think that artificial intelligence is intelligent in the sense of the word?
Well, this is a question that we had prepared, but I think we've dealt with that question a lot. So I think, yeah, this is the hard question. Depends what we mean. Is it weak AI, strong AI? Classically, that is a distinction that goes back to a philosopher like John Searle, who did this distinction between weak and strong AI. Weak AI, you say that AI is just a tool. It's only syntactic. It's following rules. It's very helpful, but it's not intelligent in the strong sense of the term, the way we can be said to be intelligent, because it has no awareness of what it does. It doesn't have any emotions. It has no embodiment. It lacks versatility also. It can't do everything that we can do. And once it has done what it has been programmed to do, it falls into idleness. It becomes still. It waits for a new instruction to be given. Even though this now is maybe challenged by Moldbook, because now it seems that these agents are able to talk to each other and so take initiatives of entering new conversations. So this is something that needs to be watched. But let's say that's weak AI. But then strong AI would be the more radical version that we also talked about now, an AI that would have features of consciousness, of experience, intentionality, self-awareness, awareness of its own self, so reflexivity, emotions, etc. So I think we are not at all yet there. Do we want to get there? That's also a question. Perhaps we should even drop entirely the very idea of wanting to get there. This would be terrible. As Daniel Dennett said, we want tools. We don't want colleagues from AI systems. So, yeah.
So by the end of this year, 2026, with all these advancements in artificial intelligence, do you think there will be any enhancements that will emerge this year by AI? And are there any that you wish to see or hope to see this year?
Yeah, I think we will move closer and closer to real agency, right? Because we always mention AI agents, but so far they are much more essentially chatbots, right? So we want to accelerate the agency part. So really the capacity to take actions, right? So we can think, for instance, in industrial plants, right? So to really control the process of a specific plant, for instance, so real agency. This is what I expect for 2026. Yeah, and what I would like to see definitely is more awareness, actually, of the physical world. And this is also something that the scientists are moving forward, right? Because, for instance, this world model try to integrate the physical knowledge inside the agents. So the agents become more and more aware of the real physical world, right? So possibly they will be more capable to make predictions also of what is going to happen, because they integrate the knowledge of the laws of physics, of chemistry, or biology, right? So they will be closer to the capacity of human beings to make predictions on the physical world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us today and for contributing your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
course.
Very interesting.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to today's episode. This was Decoded by SUAD. See you next time.